Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. So, sorry I didn't go live or post fight this weekend. I had visitors visiting Tai Jung, so I was out for dinner the night before and drinks, and then out for brunch the next day. So, I wasn't around to watch the PBC event, which was okay because considering it was on pay-per-view and not part of the zone, it's impossible for me to actually purchase it legally, so I would have just had to try to find a stream I could steal. And consistently, I'm finding streams that just cut out and make it very complicated to do live events when I have shitty streams that I need to watch and actually talk about boxing. But I was following the fights, and then obviously I did watch them afterwards. So basically, I just wanted to go over it now. I don't want JB to say that I'm ignoring it because of whatever racial narrative he's going to push towards it. It's nothing to do with that at all. I always said that I thought the Benavidez Morrel fight was a very good fight, a very 50-50 even fight. I was predicting Morrel to get the victory, but obviously David Benavidez's experience was too much for the young fighter. Ironically, I saw some people try to hate on Benavidez getting the victory because Morrel's only had 11 professional fights. It's kind of similar to what people did to Bud Crawford when he beat Madrimov. People consistently try to fucking hate on fighters all the time. I mean, there's a difference between being factual and honest and specifically, looking for reasons to hate on fighters. I'm not a guy who is pushing Benavidez that much right now because in truth, I don't like the way he's being used to basically shit on Canelo Alvarez. People would rather use Benavidez to hate on Canelo Alvarez like Max, as opposed to just praising David Benavidez for what he's been doing over the last few years. Over the last few years, probably because of necessity for the PBC and necessity for his career, he's literally stepped up his competition and taken on very good fights. Obviously first against Caleb Plant, a guy Canelo had already beaten. And then, of course, Demetrius Andrade, which was a very good win. Andrade obviously was an undefeated fighter, had never been beaten before. And then obviously moved to 175, took on Gvozdyk. We have to be honest, though, this is not the Gvozdyk that Beterbiev beat years earlier. This was a man who retired from boxing and was out of the game for 4 years before he came back against limited, mediocre opponents. Kind of like when Tyson Fury came back before fighting Deontay Wilder. Sure, he came back, but the caliber of opponents he was in with were not even top 100 fighters. They were very low-level opponents just to basically get himself back into shape. Very similar to what Tyson Fury had did when he came back initially, fighting real limited opponents. And then you jump in to face a world champion. Obviously, there's a big difference between the level of competition you're in. And obviously that showed in both cases. Fury, most people feel, beat Wilder, but he didn't look dominant in the first fight. And for Gvozdyk, he was good enough to survive, but he never looked like he was really ever going to beat Benavidez in that fight. And then obviously now taking on the opponent that many people thought he should have fought at 168 in David Morrel. It's a very good fight, a good performance from him. And obviously now it puts him in line to fight the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev. But unfortunately, prior to the fight even happening, he torpedoed that by saying that he's not really interested in working with Turki Al-Sheikh because he is a PBC fighter. What's he trying to say? That the winner of Bivol Beterbiev is going to have to cross over to the PBC to make the fight? See, this is the problem why people dislike the PBC, because of this kind of mentality, right? So it's like when Canelo had to cross over to the PBC to get undisputed versus Caleb Plant. Since when does a fighter like Canelo, an A-side, need to cross over to fight a title holder, right? If it was Wilder or Tank Davis or Earl Spence in the same situation, these same fans would fucking lose their shit over it. But when it's a non-PBC fighter, and then they try to use this to get them to come over to the PBC, they ignore the consistency, right? This is the problem with some fans. They just are hypocrites and contradict themselves consistently. The reality is the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev do not need to go over to the PBC. They're the undisputed champions. They have huge money fights working with Turki Al-Sheikh. What is the necessity for them to chase after David Benavidez, a fighter who's never even beaten a top 10 175-pound fighter? And yes, Morrel and Gvozdyk are not top 10 175-pound fighters. Gvozdyk, as I said, had been retired for 4 years, and Morrel beat one fighter who hasn't been relevant at 175 for years. So, well, they're good name opponents. That's what they are. They're not legitimate top 10 175-pound fighters at this time. You know, if it goes to purse bid and the PBC wins the purse bid, that's fine. See, that's the way boxing goes. You know, there's no reason not for a fight to happen. You just need to put in a bigger purse bid than the competition, and then you are free to promote the fight, right? So hopefully this fight can get maneuvered and made in one way or another, but consistently from what we've seen from the PBC for years and years and years, don't be surprised if Benavidez goes in a different route and makes excuses and, you know, continues to clout chase off of Canelo Alvarez and acts like, you know, somehow he doesn't have to bend over to take it from Turki Al-Sheikh to get undisputed, right? Even though this is two opportunities he could have had for undisputed, yet probably he's got himself to blame more than anybody else. One thing we have heard is the possibility of him going up to cruiserweight to take on Zurdo, right? And while that would be a great fight, you got to put it in perspective. You're walking away from undisputed at 175 to go up to fight, yes, a unified champion at cruiserweight in Zurdo. But once again, is this a more significant fight? You beat Zurdo Ramirez, sure, you become a 3-weight world champion. Well, sorry, a 2-weight world champion, because currently you're not a world champion at light heavyweight. It's kind of like what Zurdo did. When Zurdo went up to 175, fought Bivol, was schooled, and then instead of trying to still become a champion at that weight, just went up to cruiserweight. That's basically what David Benavidez looks like he might try as far as his next maneuver. And while I don't hate the fight, you know, you got to put it in legacy perspective. You're walking away from a far bigger legacy fight to do what? Do a fight that you can do in Vegas, right? And while I think Zurdo and Benavidez is a great fight, and I'm sure it would put up pretty good numbers in the United States on pay-per-view, maybe you could even do as much as 300, 350,000 pay-per-view buys, which isn't too bad. I'm sure that's probably far more than the David Morrel fight is going to do. I have no problem with these guys being successful. The issue is, do you really want to make fights that boxing fans want? Or are you going to consistently push fights that benefit your promoter, but are fights that boxing fans have never asked for? Tank Davis is the perfect example of that. This is a man who still hasn't fought a 135-pound world champion, has still never unified at any weight division. And by pointing that out, I'm not hating on him, because, you know, I would say this about any top fighter. At a certain point, people just want to see you take on legitimate competition. I heard somebody say that, oh, Fannin. And you know when Fannin says it, it's absolutely fucking cap and not true at all. But he says the perspective, the fight between Tank Davis and Lamont Roach is being speculated to do 500,000 pay-per-view buys. It's like, really? Really? You think Fulton and Tank Davis is going to do 500,000 buys? Get fucking real. Like, these guys are moronic, really. You know, let's be honest. Tank Davis' only fight that's done more than 250 pay-per-view buys is against Ryan Garcia, who's a social media personality. Every other fight he's done has not cracked that 300,000 pay-per-view buy ceiling yet, which is fine. It's not terrible. They're consistent. You make money. It's not bad, right? But the point is, it's a far away from 500,000, and it's a far away from the 1.2 million you did with Ryan Garcia. And if you consistently fight this level of opponent, you have to figure that this is consistently the kind of numbers you're going to get, because none of these people are that intriguing to casual fans. And that's what we're talking about here, casual fans, not hardcore fans, because hardcore fans are eager to watch everything in boxing. But the ones that really get casual sports fans involved are fights that actually grab people's interest. Names, sometimes even names that are past their prime or old, are better than fighters that have no name recognition at all. But overall, it was a good fight. Benavidez did what he had to do. I hope he ends up going to Saudi Arabia on the 22nd to be ringside for the Bivol Beterbiev rematch. I saw people saying, well, if Bivol wins, they're going to do a trilogy. Well, no. That potentially may be something they do, but it's not confirmed. Turki Al-Sheikh literally just said the week prior to the Morrel Benavidez fight is he wants to see the winners of that fight face the winner of Bivol and Beterbiev. And he invited the winner to come to Saudi Arabia to sit ringside. So I think he's more interested in making that fight than potentially doing a rematch. But then again, we have to wait to see how the fight unfolds. It could be, you know, a Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler-esque fight. And, you know, people will just be that much more gravitated towards doing a rematch. I don't think so, but you never know. On the undercard, we had, which was a spectacular performance from Stephen Fulton. Fulton coming out, really controlling distance, not sort of getting pulled into the slugfest that he had with Figueroa at 122 pounds, where he was able to edge Figueroa in a very controversial but closely fought match between the two of them. A lot of people were favoring Figueroa in the rematch. One reason because he's looked really dominant in 126 and explosive and really walked through a lot of fighters that he's faced. Whereas Fulton, in his one fight, after a long layoff, got dropped and did not look great at all. And based on one person's stellar performance compared to another person's less than stellar performance, and the fact that they were in a very competitive fight previously, and now you move up in weight, which you would think would favor the far bigger fighter, because now he could put on his natural weight, be much stronger and more dominant in the rematch. But that's not how the fight unfolded. I mean, Fulton was able to really outbox him, not allow him to get into a rhythm that benefited his style of fighting, and ended up becoming a two-time world champion, which is fantastic. As I said leading up to the fight, I was favoring Figueroa to win because of the reasons I just listed, but I was hoping that Fulton would win, right? Because Fulton winning looks great for a fighter that I like, which is obviously the monster Inoue. Now the fight between Inoue and Fulton, it has aged that much better, right? Truthfully, it has. Whenever a fighter you beat goes on to win world titles and unified titles and do significant things after you beat him, that just continues to make your resume look that much better. And when people try to hate on Inoue saying he doesn't fight anybody, well, they're having a harder time trying to push that argument now that Stephen Fulton is once again a world champion, right? And coming off of a very, very good performance at that. So congratulations to Fulton, and thank you very much for helping to solidify Inoue's resume more and more for American boxing fans. Then, of course, we had Isaac Cruz versus Fierro. I put a question on X, and that's what it was. It was a question. I just said robbery, question mark, question mark, question mark, because as I said, I didn't watch the fight. And I saw all the statements people were putting on X during the fight and how competitive it was and how people felt that it could have been a draw, right? A lot of people were predicting that before the scorecards were actually mentioned. So when the scorecards came in, and one scorecard was so lopsided, and the way the whole fight ended as far as the scorecards were announced for Cruz, uh, I asked a question because I didn't see the fight, and I was curious what people who had watched it actually believed. And, people took that as if I was somehow, farming for views and things of that nature, and, trolling and doing, but that was not my intention. I was asking a legitimate question. I'm not the kind of person who consistently always pushes controversy in fights. I'm not the guy that always talks about PED use, and I'm not the guy that always talks about judges and promoters and the fixes in. That's other people's channels. That's not me. Consistently, I avoid this line of conversation. I just was really interested in what people thought as far as the Cruz Fierro fight. So feel free to leave on the comment section below. What did you think about the fight? Do you think it was a robbery? Do you think it was very close? I mean, the problem with these kind of fights, when you do have one scorecard that is so out of whack, it obviously leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. And we've seen that time and time and time again. So it's no surprise that once again, people are sort of commenting on this one. It'll be interesting to see what Cruz does next. Obviously, he was just offered a huge money fight with Ryan Garcia, but he walked away from that, allowing Ryan Garcia to fight Hitchens, which is a great fight, but at the same time, oh, sorry, no, I'm mistaken. Sorry, I'm getting Hitchens and Teofimo Lopez mixed up, which is also a great fight. Obviously, that's a unification fight. Makes a lot of sense. The only problem with that is if Teo is really going to go to 147, why is he fighting Hitchens at 140 for unification? It doesn't seem to make much sense, but, it is what it is. But Ryan Garcia, sorry, he's going to be fighting Rolly Romero instead of Cruz. And, Cruz literally walked away from a big money fight, and we know he's been very eager to get that rematch with Tank Davis to, really capitalize financially. Yet here he gives us an opportunity to work with Turki Al-Sheikh to fight Ryan Garcia, who we know is a draw, and potentially get a big payday, and he walks away from it handing it to Rolly Romero. To be fair, I think obviously the Rolly Romero-Ryan Garcia fight sells better, because we know that Rolly Romero is a douche who fucking speaks English and talks loads of shit. And because of that, it's going to be a very intriguing build-up for the fight. Unlike Cruz, who obviously only speaks Spanish and obviously isn't nearly as interesting of a character as Rolly Romero. But it is what it is. It'll be interesting to see what direction Cruz goes now that he did walk away from the big money fight. Maybe a rematch with Tank Davis is something we could look forward to seeing him in later on in 2025. We will see. And then, of course, Cromel Moten had another victory on the undercard against really an obscure nobody type of fighter, which is kind of funny because at one time they were talking about him making his pro debut against the 126 pound world champion. Yet after the fights he's already been in, and I'm not sure off the top of my head how many it's been, he still hasn't fought a fighter with 10 victories. So you could see they're really clout chasing early on in his career, and that's fine. He's a young kid. He doesn't need to step up his level of opposition that radical that soon. But it's amazing when they were talking about him fighting a world champion, people were actually acting as if, he would have won that fight, and, it was a mismatch and he would have won dominantly. Yet right now he's fighting tin cans. And as a young kid, that's fine. You can fight tin cans. Nobody expects you to step up and face high-level opponents at this point. It's kind of like Abdullah Mason, who's been around longer than Moten, and consistently still isn't even fighting 10-rounders, is fighting 8-round fights against really low-level opposition. But his opposition compared to Moten is way better. So it'll be interesting to see which one of those two fighters gets pushed into a big fight quicker. You would think it would be Abdullah Mason, but you never know. You never know. To be fair, I didn't really know who Tank Davis was before he fought Petraza. So, you know, uh, you never know when a guy is going to be put into a big fight, depending on opportunities available to him. Overall, I guess the PBC card was pretty good. I heard good reviews. Uh, the one thing I laughed about was True School Sports. I don't know why somebody is so hostile to everything Turkey Al Sheikh and Saudi Arabia. So much so that literally he fucking really kissed the PBC's ass in that comment that I saw post fight. And I'm just like, fuck, man. Like, it's just a bad look for a boxing channel to be so negatively biased against one promoter or one boxing entity, but yet be so fucking jammed up another's ass. You could be a little more down the middle. Turkey Al Sheikh is doing great things for boxing. Whether you're disappointed the fights are being taken out of America or not, I can understand that. But, you know, when I grew up, lots of great fights were outside of America. Muhammad Ali fought uh, in Europe consistently, fought in Philippines, fought obviously in Zaire. Frazier fought obviously in the Philippines, and fought in Jamaica. Foreman fought in Jamaica, and obviously fought in Zaire. So world title fights in the 70s consistently were fighting outside of America. Big fights, right? Fights like Leonard and others and Ali and people fighting in Canada, right? So it's not unusual for superstar fighters to fight outside the US. Yes, as an American, you would hope they would fight more consistently in America. And I think that's the way boxing is going to be for the most part, right? Because they're talking about that Canelo Alvarez Bud Crawford fight. And what they're saying is that fight probably is going to be happening in Vegas, right? Because everybody involved does understand the significance of the American market. But some fights that just don't really move the needle in the American market, you might as well do them in Saudi Arabia. The fighters are going to get paid more money. The fight's not a big draw in the US anyway. So why not take it abroad and get the most out of it, right? It's like Tyson going to Japan to fight Buster Douglas. They knew that fight wouldn't do huge numbers in the States, but obviously the Japanese boxing public would pay for anything that Tyson was involved in. So, you know, they could easily push that fight in Japan. And you know, it's like Pacquiao who fought in Hong Kong or Macau. So, you know, it is what it is. Boxing is always looking to capitalize financially as much as they can to push fights that maybe wouldn't necessarily sell in a certain market. It is what it is. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. What did you think about this PBC card, Morrel versus Benavidez? From 0 to 10, 0 being the shittiest fucking fight card in the history of boxing and 10 being the best thing you've ever seen. Where would you rank this PBC card? It'll be interesting. Obviously, it looks like the PBC is going to be doing more fight cards this year, which obviously would be good because last year they really did nothing. 5 or 6 fight cards in the whole year is very disappointing. So hopefully they're going to come back and do more in 2025. Obviously in 2023, the PBC had a fantastic year. And then 2024, it was abysmal. So hopefully in 2025, it's somewhere in between. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time. Peace out. I'll be going live sometime later this week talking about upcoming fights and fights that have been announced in the foreseeable future. So stay tuned. Look forward to that.